Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Clipping record. Clipping is a West Coast hip-hop trio. This is their sophomore full-length LP. I broke down their debut album, Mid-City, last year. It ended up being one of my favorite hip-hop albums of 2013. Clipping features the artistic input of Jonathan Snipes, William Hudson, and Daveed Diggs, all of whom separately had their own different musical styles and projects, some of which were collaborative and dabbled in ambient music, noise music, drone, hip-hop. But in Clipping, they have found common ground for all of these musical styles, producing hip-hop instrumentals that are harsh, abrasive, and loaded with unusual samples. But lyrically, Clipping came off as being incredibly influenced by the violence and the hedonism in gangsta rap. Daveed's lyrics simultaneously showed a high level of self-awareness, like he wasn't really wholly embracing or endorsing this lifestyle, more just going for a gritty portrayal of it. In his rhymes and in his delivery, I think Daveed comes through with a high amount of personality. Sometimes the speed at which he raps is really impressive, and together with Jonathan and William, he can pull together songs that are either incredibly catchy, like Bout That, or on the flip side, something much more cerebral and vivid in terms of storytelling, like the song Story. After the release of Mid-City, it didn't take Clipping too long to sign with Sub Pop Records, and now I'm just kind of sitting here waiting to see if they can recreate that noise hop magic that they were able to on their debut LP. And I think they do. Clipping brings new sounds and experiments to the table and simultaneously makes a record that I think is a little deeper, a little more accessible, like with the song Work Work, lead single from this LP, and features all these bouncy, metallic samples that are just springing throughout the entirety of this track. It's a really odd sound for a hip-hop song, but simultaneously I think this song features one of the darker and more catchy bass lines on this entire LP, a really nice head-bobbing groove. This track instrumentally to me is as catchy as any new beat from DJ Mustard, and obviously pulls a bit of influence from the whole Atlanta snap revival trend going on right now. Then there's tracks on here like Dominoes, which very bravely works in a children's chorus sample and a really nice piano line. It's a risk that pays off big time, especially with an interesting verse on this track that features what seems like a vivid lyrical portrayal of a schoolyard throwdown. Then there's the track Get Up on this thing, which features an amazingly creative and genius sample of an alarm clock going off. Really not only taking the sound of the alarm clock, but also borrowing the tempo of the alarm clock for the background of the verse, and it sounds really simple, really skeletal. Of course, you're not hearing anything else other than this alarm clock, but as it works into the chorus, you get this amazingly sung hook from Mariel Jacoda. And underneath her voice, this alarm clock gets harmonized with other alarm clock sounds, and all of a sudden it becomes panoramic and wide, reverb-heavy and epic. And this track is a part of a really interesting progression in the middle of this album that starts with the song Tonight, then goes into the song Dream, and then Get Up, and then the track Or Die. Then there's also the track at the end of this album titled Ends, and there's a really awesome, fiery, just explosive, fast-flowing intro that kicks off this entire LP. It's very clear that Clipping paid close attention to the flow and the feel of these songs as they segued into one another. Of all the catchier tracks on this LP, the most glaring flaw is actually in the song Tonight, though, which features this ridiculous auto-tune chorus from Daveed, where it's actually the throatiness of his singing on this track that makes his performance sound so kind of silly. There's a weird beat change-up that comes in the middle of this track too that's sort of unexpected, and GANGSTA of 3-6 Mafia actually features on this track, who was actually my most anticipated feature of this entire LP, but sadly she didn't end up being my favorite. Not that her verse is terrible or anything like that. I would say overall none of the features on here are absolutely mind-blowing. However, in the greater scheme of this LP, what they bring to the table just makes sense. Juice, King T, Cock Pistol Cree, Gangsta Boo. A lot of these people are really seasoned, long-time underground vets that even though Clipping isn't making true blue gangsta rap, it very clearly shows that they pay attention and kind of know their shit. So not only does that sort of bring a bit of credibility to these tracks, but I think it also brings balance to what Daveed is doing lyrically and flow-wise as well, which is typically very detailed and flashy. Now, even though there are catchier tracks on this LP, there's another side to this album as well that gets much more dark dark, demented, and experimental, like the song Body and Blood, which essentially brings new meaning to the phrase industrial hip-hop, where you've got these heavy, thudding, distorted kick drums that are just... The song is loaded with all these sexual phrases that you would typically hear in a more popular radio-friendly hip-hop song, but the track is actually about a type of black widow seductress woman who lures men to kill them and disassemble them brutally. And then there's tracks on here like Inside Out, which sort of is this funny, tongue-in-cheek, nonchalant portrayal of violence in the streets happening around everyday life, and it sort of points out the absurdity of how weird it is that this is sort of becoming an everyday thing. A lot of these street violence themes are also addressed on a much catchier beat on the song Summertime. There's the song Story 2, which is the epic sequel to Story off of Mid-City, which follows the very dark tale of an entirely different character who seems to be getting over a kind of a dark past where he was a bit of a serial arsonist. But on this track, maybe because he tells somebody in confidence who is very close to him, karma makes sure that he suffers the same fate that many of his victims did. Then there's the song Ends, which not only is toward the end of this LP, but also talks about the ends of stories and the middles of stories and the ends of lives. It's this track and others on here too where you get David diving pretty deeply into a lyrical theme that he follows very passionately from the beginning to the end of a song. And I would actually say conceptuality, the themes that play into each individual song off of this LP and this LP as a whole, is maybe one of this record's biggest selling points. And then the entire LP ends off with Williams Mix, which is a bit of an odd noise piece that takes sounds and samples from all of the songs previous to it and just delivers them in this really overwhelming, relentless jumble. And it's a pretty appropriate finish. Overall, I love this thing. I'm incredibly impressed with it, and I think these guys topped what they did on Mid-City. I think this is an incredibly creative hip-hop album, probably the most creative hip-hop album I'm going to hear this year. And not only is this LP incredibly experimental, but I think it's good and it's technical and it is skilled and shows talent by the traditional standards that we judge hip-hop for the most part. That is the one thing that I think Clipping does very well in comparison with all the other experimental hip-hop artists out there right now. I think it's amazing that they're able to come through with a record that is so standard and yet so unorthodox. The instrumentals on this LP overall are disorienting, they're strange, they're perplexing, and at times, especially on tracks like Dominoes, beautiful, moving, gorgeous, and rich. I'm feeling a decent to strong 9 on this LP. Transition, if you've given this record a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? What do you think I should review next? And that's it. Anthony Fantano, Clipping forever.